Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Fitness Solution. On the other end of the line, coming out of, hang on, can I remember? Is it Wisconsin you're based in?
Indiana.
Perfect. I'm close, I think.
Close.
Excellent. On the other end of the line, I've got Jared Hamilton, who actually came onto the podcast a long time ago, probably like 2 years ago. And we had all kinds of issues recording it, all kinds of issues with Wi-Fi in my apartment and getting across the Atlantic. It was a really windy day as well. It just wasn't good. So I thought it's only fair, and luckily he didn't hold it against me, and he's here to come and help all of you again. So Jared, say hey.
What's up, guys? Hope you're well. Thank you again, my man, for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Mate, I'm only cheating myself by not having you on it as many times as I possibly can. So it's not a problem at all, mate. It's not a problem at all. So Jared's wonderful. His social medias are just astounding. He's got such a great attitude towards fitness and fat loss and fun. He loves eating donuts. He's a great guy, but there's no point in me telling you who he is and what he does and what he's about, because he knows it a lot better than I do. So Jared, let's hear the symphony of your life.
So I guess the Cliff Notes version of my life, it's really pretty low key. I'm 28, born and raised in Indiana here in the States, and I was just a fat kid. That's the thing, is I used to think it was like, I used to be like a victim about it. Like I was a fat kid growing up, and I was like, oh, poor me. Why me? Why do I have to be the one with bad genetics? Why do I have to work as hard? Like all this stuff. But fast forward 20 years, it served me pretty well, because now, I own my company, which is, a fitness coaching company that now I can relate to every person I ever talk to, just because, I've been there. I know what it's like. I know what it's like sacrificing like your mental health for, a physical body, and trying to do every trendy diet known to man. I was scared of carbs, thought eating every 3 hours was the magic. I used to spend more money on supplements than I did on groceries, and just like, the stereotypical stuff. And, but now it's pretty awesome, because what started as just like a side gig in college is now, fast forwarded, is what I do for a living full time now. And so that's what, I do online coaching with people all over the planet. So it's pretty cool.
Have you what's the furthest client you got? Is it Australia? You hit New Zealand?
I have Australia. I've had Egypt,
Perfect.
Taiwan, Poland.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's all over the place, man. It's kind of wild. So, because it's actually weird. I was in New York last weekend for just a fun trip, and I met up with some clients, which was really kind of trippy, because I have clients in like New York and in Jersey, and like I met up with like one of my girls in Jersey. She drove over, and it was just like, I've been coaching her for like the last 6 months, and it's like just seeing her, like hugging her and like seeing her, it was almost weird. It wasn't weird. It was almost surreal. Like the same thing was with like the fitness coaches. I grew close to other fitness coaches in the industry, and I like stayed with them, and I'm like, I know everything about you, but like I never met you in person. It was almost weird. So I love it though.
No, I can well believe that. Like when I was acting, it was a bit similar. Like you'd meet someone pretty famous, and and if you're an actor, and they're an actor who you really admire, like an actor you've studied or you've seen a lot of their work or something like that, I feel like you almost have a conversation with them based on everything you know about their roles, and I bet they kind of think that they know it, it better than they probably can remember it, and they're like, I don't remember that moment. What are you talking about? It is very surreal and very strange. I remember once, a bit of a side note, but it'll be fine. I did a video for the British Army. It was like a film for the British Army. I was playing an alcoholic soldier, and yeah, mate, it was great. And I tell you what, actually, in that I had to down, like we did about 15 takes of me downing a pint of beer, but the beer was orange juice and lemonade. And I tell you, after like the 15th take, it felt like my blood had changed to orange juice and lemonade. It was horrible. God. It was horrible. And we didn't have to keep doing the take because I kept messing it up, so it wasn't my fault. But no, and I had someone, and I was sat in a bar up in Chelmsford in Essex. And in Chelmsford is where they have the prison for the British Army. So if you've been naughty in the British Army, they'll lock you up and put you in Chelmsford. Colchester, it was Colchester. And and I was sat in this bar, and this guy came up to me like a proper skinhead, proper jarhead. Like I was like, oh my God, it was quite scary. He was like, I recognize you, I know you. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? You're like, where are you from? And I was like, mate, I've never been here before in my life. I haven't done anything wrong. And it was from the film. And he was like, you're that dude in that film. It was great.
You're the drunk soldier.
Yeah, that's basically what he said. And then he got all his mates. He's like, I watched your film like 7 times because I couldn't sort my life out. I was like, oh God. Yeah, hey ho. So I know that feeling well. It is strange, but that's great. And so I've got you on today to basically talk about, you know, like as you put it, the inside out of fat loss.
Yeah.
And the psychology that goes behind it, and how, you know, you have to fix the brain in order to kind of get the body moving along as well. So when you term it inside out, how would you go about dissecting that for someone?
So I try to keep it as simple as possible. It's the concept of like your headspace, your internal work, your internal dialogue, how you think, how you believe, and all the stuff that goes on in your head is the foundation of everything you do. But too often people avoid it or try to build their, what I call the fat loss house, with a really poor foundation. It's like, an example I give to people is like, imagine if you have the opportunity and the funds to build your dream home. You won a contest and you like, all right, you can build your multi-million-dollar dream home. But the builders come to you and they're like, hey, Adam, like we're going to take 6 months to put this foundation in. It's going to look awesome, but we're going to take a solid 6 months to build just the concrete foundation of the house. More than likely, most people will be like, yeah, by all means, because everyone knows without a good foundation, the house is worthless and it will fall. But like, imagine if you said, you know what? I just really want my house. I don't care. Just forget the foundation, put the walls and the roof on. Like, that's ignorant. That would never work, because you know the house would crumble in like one storm and it would fall over and it'd be terrible. But when it comes to fat loss, that's what people do. Like, especially because a lot of people have a poor foundation mentally around the stuff they have. They struggle with emotional eating. They struggle with binge eating. They struggle with poor relationships with food. They struggle with anxiety around the scale. They struggle with all or nothing mentalities. They struggle with, like, there's like 40 different things in the head that have nothing to do with calories and nothing that has to do with strength training. It's all about your relationship with yourself, your relationship with food, your relationship with the scale, being run by your emotions, making ill decisions based on emotions. There's all these facets within it, what I call the psychology of fat loss. But if you don't handle those and you just diet anyway, or do workouts anyway, or neglect all the internal work, your house is going to come crumbling down. Right? Because it's one of my core values when I do coaching with people, is one of my what I call my coaching core values is every decision is made from the end. So back to that house analogy, when the house you're in right now, the guy that built it made every decision when he framed it, when he put the roof on, when he hung the drywall, when he put the flooring in, he thought, will this house be here in 100 years? And every decision he made was not predicated on the first 3 months of you living there. Every decision he made was predicated on, will this house be here in 100 years? And that's how he made every decision. But the issue is, when it comes to fat loss, people don't think like that. People are so quick to do trendy diets because it works, or it's fast even though they know they can't sustain it, or they're willing to, I see people all the time, they sacrifice their entire mental health, their internal well-being for six-pack, to lose 20 pounds. Whereas it's just the wrong way to go about it. That's why what I call, when I do like with my coaching and stuff, is what I call dieting from the inside out, and attacking first and foremost and handling the internal side of things. Because I feel like it's one big mark the fitness industry and coaches lack is, like, to be honest, most coaches, if a client says, I struggle with emotional eating, the coach just says, well, get the trigger food out of the house, and that's it. It's not a commonplace in coaching to talk about things like internal work, meditation, therapy, journaling, inner child work, like all these intricacies of your internal world. It's not commonplace in our industry. So that's why there's got to be a lot of things under the umbrella of what I call dieting from the inside out.
Yeah, that's huge. I use a similar analogy. I call them the roots of fat loss. I'm like, a lot of people, when they see a tree, they'll think, okay, I want to lose weight, so let's do exercise, and that's like the leaves on the branches. Let's do, get a diet, that's the other leaf on the branch, and, sort out nutrition or something like that. That's the other thing, or get a personal trainer or whatever. But what they haven't done is they haven't looked at the roots that are going to keep that oak tree there for years. I love that. That is their anxiety. I've got a good infographic on Instagram. I'll send it to you. It's like, their anxiety, their relationship with food, their depression, the list goes on and on. The way they talk to themselves, and stuff like that. And and I think what is great is there's people like you, and I like to think I voice the opinion quite often as well, is that, you know, we are personal trainers, and like, for me, this was the first part of it. Like, I knew about all of this before I knew about fitness. I knew about all of this before I learned strength training. I learned about all this before I learned how to run a 5K. And because of my background in acting, and it was all psychology based and everything else, and I knew about, you know, figuring out the internal in order to figure out the external. And you do that very much in the acting room. And I do feel like there's a lot of people out there who are changing the trend, and I think that's wholly positive.
Yeah.
Are you finding people come to you for your online coaching, and they already have a handle on that's how they need to approach it?
Yes and no. I have some people who like literally, like, I could have two what I call application calls when someone's applying to work with me. I could literally have two back to back and be so far off, though. Like, I've had people come to me who are like, yeah, I want to lose weight, but my main goal is I want to fix my relationships with food, or I want to quit being controlled by the bathroom scale, or I want to learn how to not be obsessive about fat loss. Where, like, they want to lose weight, but their main goal is around their headspace. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But then again, I've had calls recently with people who their main goal is just fat loss, and we'll be on the phone call, and I come to find out they binge eat, they have anxiety around the scale, they have all these mental issues around fat loss, and we have to fix those first. And I'll say that, and I'll talk to them and give them the exact analogy about the house. And I'll tell them, I'm like, hey, well, first and foremost, we got to fix this side of stuff first, because if we don't take care of it, like, you're never going to have long-term change. And they go, oh, and they're like disappointed, because they're like, it's kind of like the analogy I gave a little bit ago, where they're like, I'm willing to sacrifice that to just get my goal. Whereas we can't do that. That's literally like having that house built and saying, I'm in a hurry, forget the foundation. Whereas that's just not a good idea.
Yeah. Have you ever had a client get to a point where you've kind of taken them on and you're like, you know what, I believe in you. I think there's something else there we can get to. You've done like a fast fat loss protocol, or you've pushed them to their goal when they've got there and they've managed it. And then once they've got there, they've kind of rebounded away from it, and it's all started to go back on. And then they've had to come back to you to refix all the initial problems that you wanted to get them to first. So, like, they've had to go through a period with you of the way they wanted to do it in order to learn that actually you need to work the other way.
Not really, because when when it comes to my style of coaching, if someone's like, no, I want to sacrifice my mental health, I don't care, I won't work with
coaching. Yeah.
Like, it's just because that goes against my core values of how I coach. Like, one of my core values is, like I said, is make decisions from the end. And if we can't do that, then we're not a good fit. So generally what happens is someone has had a rough history with another coach, or on their own with, overnight diets, trendy diets, crazy rapid fat loss protocols and things like that. And like, if someone wants that, like, to be honest, I won't take them on as a client, just because I'm not the guy for that. It's that kind of thing. So generally, if that happens, it's because they've had that experience with someone else. And then they're like, okay, Jared, I lost 50 pounds, gained back 60. I get what you're saying. I need to do this the right way. And that's usually how that happens.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's really important that we know our boundaries, and we know who will work with us and who won't, isn't it? And so, like, let's take a couple of those things then, and let's see how we could reverse engineer it, say, or work from the end and back. So let's take scale anxiety, something you mentioned. Like, say someone's listening to this and they fear the scale, they can't stand stepping on it. They just they know, like, they've tried the daily thing, they've tried the weekly thing, they've tried the monthly thing. Each one seems to bring up different levels of anxiety. Each one seems to create success and failure, and they can't find the rhythm that works, because they feel like they've tried all three methods and not one of it works, and they just can't figure it out. How are you going to take them from the inside out to fix that? How can they get used to the scale and understand its crazy anomalies?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So there's a few. So how I attack, because we have to attack every one of these differently. We have to attack scale anxiety different than we attack food relationships, and how we attack progress, regress, all that. But with scale anxiety, how I handle it is, if someone listening to this is struggling with the scale anxiety, there are two reasons, and two reasons alone. Is either you don't understand the scale, and that's just a knowledge thing, or you're using it improperly as a tool and you're using it out of context. So for example, everything comes down to those two. You don't understand it or you're using it wrong. For example, if someone hops on the scale and weighs 150 pounds and tomorrow they weigh 155 pounds, you and I both know you can't physiologically store 5 pounds of fat overnight. So if someone freaks out because they fluctuated 5 pounds overnight, then they don't understand the scale. We need to take a step back and educate about the scale. It's like if somebody's scared to fly. Well, if someone's scared to fly, it's because they don't understand how flying is actually safer than driving, right? It's from an educational standpoint, it's like, oh no, that person doesn't understand. So at that point, I will literally like take someone, walk them back through and educate them on the scale. Like it could be something and really walk them through it. Like if I weigh 150 pounds and I drink a bottle of water, I will now weigh 151 pounds in about 4 seconds. and it's really working them through and re-educating them about it, because it's a foundational issue of they're physically have wrong information about the scale and about fat loss. If it bothers them that much, if it fluctuates overnight, it's because they somehow think the body magically stores fat in 24 hours, which is not the case at all. So at that point, it's an education thing. But then there's the other side of it is most people are using the second piece wrong. They're taking it out of context or they're using it wrong as a tool. As in paper or scissors are great for cutting paper. But if I use a pair of scissors to cut down a tree, I'm using that tool out of context, because a tool is only as good as the context in which it's being used.
Yep.
So for example, if someone weighs themselves every week, every month, every Tuesday, because they feel fat, and they have no context with that weigh-in. So they might weigh themselves on Monday the 1st, and they weigh 150 pounds. And then they weigh themselves on Monday the 14th, 2 weeks later, and they're like 153 pounds. And they go, oh my gosh, I gained weight. I'm not losing weight. But again, they're using that tool out of context, because you can't just say you weigh this on Monday and weigh that on 2 weeks later, because there's a lot between then that can happen, because of going back to the educational piece. If you don't understand how the scale works, understand the biological processes of how the body stores water and fat, and what fluctuations mean, and how fluctuations are normal, and expectations around it. It's all this information stuff. But when people think it's like inherently one thing, the other part that I would almost call a part 3 is when people have their identity of who they are wrapped up in the scale. Like the fact that who they are is 130 pounds, but who they aren't is 131 pounds. Whereas if your identity is wrapped up in the scale, that's like your identity being wrapped up in the kind of car you drive. Whereas what happens when that goes away, you go away with it. If someone's identity is wrapped up in the scale, well, every time it fluctuates, you're literally taking a jab at your identity, which is then your brain goes into fight or flight, because it's taking a jab at survival, right? So usually when it comes to the scale, it's one of those 3. They either don't understand it, and that's an educational thing. They're using it wrong as a tool, which gets back into doing things like daily weigh-ins and pictures and measurements and dialing in things like calories and protein and strength training to get a full piece of this contextually, but then also making sure your headspace is in check about where your identity is at, to make sure it's not in the pounds you weigh.
Yeah, I often find with clients who I have with scale anxiety, my online clients, it's very much like the hardest period is like that first month, because they don't have enough data to understand the patterns of what's going on. And once I get maybe a month, maybe 2 months of data in with them, then I'm like, great, now we can look at what the patterns are. So on a Tuesday, if you always fluctuate, you've got data. And getting them to understand that they've got a phase of accruing data to understand that context is difficult. But if I can get that buy-in, then often they're on a path well away from it, and removing those things. And the other thing you say about identity is nuts. Like, it's because we wrap ourselves up in identity all the time. Like, I know recently I've wrapped myself up quite wrongly and quite irritatingly. I think a lot of it has to do with having more time at home, and like literally follower numbers on Instagram, right? And that sounds absolutely. That sounds as daft to someone listening to this, I'd imagine, as it does to us about them wrapping up their identity on the scale. But like, I'd lose 100 followers overnight, and for a good sort of 2-3 days, I was thinking, Jesus, mate, I'm just never going to make this work. I'm never going to succeed. I must suck big time. And I look for external validation, and then, you know, somebody pops into my message request and they're like, buy 4,000 followers for 20 quid. I'm like, don't do it. But I'm also like, I could do it just to alleviate that annoyance. And then I might as well be sucking on a fat loss pill, as opposed to actually working inside out, right? And I can't afford a fat loss pill, mate. I don't know if you, I mean, if I have one of those, I'm going to disappear off the face of the earth.
Right.
And for me, it's the same thing. And we wrap our identities up in everything, and it's so hard to not. But when it becomes so much more personal, like Instagram for me is the same analogy, because it's a mark of my business or how well I'm doing in terms of my everything, which is ridiculous. And people are the same with the scale. No, I get that. It's tough, isn't it? Do you find like getting your clients to look through the data, to look at their daily weigh-ins and watch graphs and stuff like that really helps with this?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's crazy. So there's a thing in psychology that I use a lot. That's called that I say the body tells the mind what to think. Right? I compare it to flying, where a lot of people like know on paper that like flying is safer than driving, right? It's like you have all the data to support flying is safer than driving, but people don't care. They are literally like reading it as they get onto the plane. They're like, holy shit, I'm so scared to fly. But it's not until they get up there that they realize, oh, nothing bad's going to happen. And then it's like someone snaps their fingers. So it's the same thing with this. Is too often, there's a quote by Will Smith. It says, if you can't get rid of the fear, show up scared. And people with the scale, they just don't use it. And they're just like, oh no, the scale doesn't define me. And then they just get rid of it. I'm like, bro, it just defined you. You literally just threw it out because you don't like the number it gives you. So often with this stuff is you just have to face it. If you have scale anxiety, getting rid of the scale does not take it away, right? It's almost like if you want to clean your house and you just take the dirt and put it under the rug, the dirt's still there. It like, you don't just get it. That would be like, that's so like it's the normal go-to, like, oh, the scale gives me anxiety, I'm just going to quit weighing myself, it's going to make it better. That's like the same logic of, I can't play guitar, so I'm just going to like watch a bunch of guitar videos and then instantly be able to play. It's like, no, the only way I'm going to be able to play guitar and I can't play is work through the suck and sound like trash for a while, and then over time it will get better percentage wise, and I'll eventually be able to sound like a rock star. It's the same thing. Is with any type of fear, you have to face it. You can't avoid the fear and hope it goes away. It doesn't work like that. Because I compare it also with the scale, is like your partner brings you a gift. Like for example, if I brought my wife home flowers, let's say I bring her flowers just once every in a while, once a month, something like that, it stays special, does it not? If I like bring her, just surprise her with gifts every once in a while, it stays special. She has an emotional response. She's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I love this. Well, what if I bring her gifts and flowers every single day? All of a sudden, it doesn't seem as special. All of a sudden, I've almost like datafied it. It's like, I bring her flowers on Monday. She's like, oh my gosh, this is great. Thank you. Then I bring her flowers on Tuesday. She's like, oh, wow. Thank you. That's really nice. That's 2 days in a row. Wednesday, oh, more flowers. Thanks. Thursday, more flowers. Friday, more flowers. And now it's been like 3 weeks, and she literally has 21 bundles of flowers.
And not enough.
She would probably, right. And all of a sudden, she probably doesn't even care anymore. Or if she does, but it does not have the same emotional effect as if when I bring it sporadically. So when someone weighs themselves every week, every month, every once when they feel fat, they keep it emotional. They keep it like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Versus like when you weigh every single day, you will naturally see trends and averages, and you're like, oh wait, I've been down for the past 3 days. I bet I'm going to spike tomorrow. Oh, there I spiked tomorrow. I bet I'm going to stay this way for a few days. Okay, it's been 3 days. I bet I'm going to drop tomorrow, and then it drops, and then you start to pick up on that. And it's the only way, in my opinion, to get through that is you have to understand it. You have to start using it correctly. And even if emotions aren't on board yet, you got to show up anyway. And through action, your body tells your mind what to think, and it will get better. But when it's something that you're uncomfortable with, that's the hard part, is most people just want to avoid it, but it doesn't take the issue away. Because I'll literally give clients that option is I'll have someone working with me and they're like, all right, Jared, the whole daily weigh and things makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm like, okay, well, here's our options then. We can either make it a goal to work through the scale anxiety and win it and get on the other side of it. Instead of avoiding that trigger, we can just eliminate the trigger, which will take time, or we can avoid it and know that when you go to the doctor next time and weigh yourself, you're probably going to have a panic attack and freak out because we never handled the trigger. We just avoided it. Which do you want to do? And I'll literally leave it up to them, but I'll let both scenarios play out. It's like, do you want to handle the trigger and get rid of it, which is going to take time? Or do you want to just avoid it, but know that when you step on the scale, the problem never went away?
On my, it's great. I mean, on my YouTube channel, I took at the start of lockdown, I took a client who hadn't looked at the scale in 2 years. And I took her through like a should you weigh yourself daily sort of challenge. And I've done a whole video on it on YouTube. And like what I found most amazing about it was not the fact that, you know, she went from not knowing it for 2 years to understanding it, facing it and going through the fears with it and coming out the other side to now being able to disregard it. But also the way she was able to inspire others once I produced that video to get other people to start doing it as well. And they could see her progress and it became infectious for them. And then they've now all done it. And then you're just going to be spreading it
awesome.
more and more. She's a superstar, that client. She has a tough time of it. And what I found with her was it always got tougher when she knew that she wasn't sticking to her calories, when she knew she wasn't in a calorie deficit. And then when the scale went up, it was a reinforcement of her already negative feeling about herself because she wasn't able to stay on the plan that she needed to stay on in order to get the scale to move in the right way. And I think that's when it becomes more difficult. Like, yeah, we can sit here and say, yeah, weigh yourself every day, you know, we'll get rid of anxiety, we'll get rid of your fear, which when I had Sarah Doff on here, she called fear false expectation appearing real, which I just love. I think that's just brilliant. And you know, we can get rid of that. But then if you're not going to, you can't do all of that if you're then going to still eat, you know, 4 McDonald's every day and expect it to go down just because you're stepping on it every day. The work still has to underpin you being able to face that fear.
Action has to line up with action has to line up with ambition. That's a saying that I use a lot. Your action always has to line up with your ambition. You know, it's exactly, you just said it beautifully.
Yeah. And also big props to you for being the first person I've ever heard to quote Will Smith.
Oh, thanks. I saw it was funny. I saw that on it was on a TikTok of his.
Right. Okay.
He's a funny one to follow on TikTok. And he had this big post saying, if you can't get rid of the fear, just show up scared. And I'm like, that is just brilliant life advice. Yeah. Like if you've got to do it, you know, it's the same kind of thing. So
yeah, it's like, the thing is if you're not willing to do that, you're going to start protecting yourself and you're going to start building walls around yourself to protect yourself. And then what happens is, like, you know, you build a wall in front of you, you build 2 walls to the side of you, build a wall behind you and put a roof on top. You're not protecting yourself from your fear. You're putting yourself in a prison away from that fear. And you're now imprisoned by your fear. And it's like, you're never going to get anywhere. I got that from Richard Nichols. But yeah, that's what it's like. So that's like the scale. I feel like we've done that. And I think people have hopefully got tons of help out of that. Oh, yeah. Then should we tackle binge eating?
We can. I mean, I'm all about it. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, man. That's a huge one. And it's something I'm still learning about as a coach as well, to be honest. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that. So how would we like reverse engineer binge eating?
So with binge eating, first and foremost, if someone's ever having these really big issues around this stuff, and more than like you and I are talking about, I'm always a fan of people getting like psychological help, like literally going and seeing a therapist who literally can diagnose and treat binge eating and things like that. But the thing with binge eating that I see in the fitness and fat loss world so much is, number one, there's a side of it where people are hiding their emotions with food, right? Like you're sad, so you're trying to not see the sad emotions with donuts or whatever. It's the same thing like when people just hide with stress. Like when people tell me, they're like, oh, the gym is my therapy. It's like, no, it's not. You're using the gym as a distraction and not see your own negativity in your life. So we don't want to distract, but that's a whole nother topic. But for the most part, in my experience with binge eating, it's because it's coming from a massive level of deprivation. So what happens is people think certain foods are good, certain are bad, so they avoid the bad ones, and then the cravings creep. And then they eventually have a day where they're like, I can't take this anymore. And that's when they go ballistic on food. It's because they keep bouncing from ultra deprive, overindulge, and binge. And that leads to more deprivation because they binge. There's the deeper side where people are like hiding their negative emotions and negativity and inner child and all this psychological stuff with food. But that's like a whole nother topic. But the bigger reason why I see a lot of people why people binge eat is just because of the way they view food. They have this preconceived list of good foods and bad foods, healthy and unhealthy, foods I should avoid, foods are okay to eat, foods that are not allowed if I want to lose weight, and foods that are allowed. Whereas that's the issue. Food is not black and white, on or off. It's not like good or bad, because there's a term I use is the dose is what makes poison lethal. So like theoretically, you could literally inject small doses of snake venom and you wouldn't die. It's only when it's a certain level. It's the same thing as so with food, it's not that like pizza is inherently bad. It's, should you eat whole pizzas at once? Probably not. But is there anything wrong with having a couple slices when you're going out with friends? It's totally fine.
The issue we have there in the UK is like a couple of slices of a pizza in America is an entire pizza in the UK.
Oh shoot!
Yeah, man,
that's hilarious.
I was watching Breaking Bad earlier. They bought a pizza and he picked up a slice. He couldn't even pick up a slice. Like, he picked up the whole thing, big. And I was like, that looks as big as my car tire. I was like, that's just crazy. Yeah, sorry.
Pizzas are huge.
Yeah,
no, you're good.
That was a really small.
But yeah. Well, but like the thing is with when it comes to the food relationship stuff is when you have this constant idea of these are good, these are bad, and then it makes it worse when it's like, okay, I'm dieting, I'm not allowed to have sugar, I'm not allowed to have junk food, I'm not allowed to have soda, I'm not allowed to have alcohol, and I have cheat foods. Just labeling things like cheat is just like the worst thing ever. Like, that's just your verbiage around food. It plays a big role. But the thing is, when you have this constant, not even balance, this constant extremism of ultra deprive because you're on a diet, that's what causes the binge. And then because you binge, that's what causes you to deprive again. It's like people like go, diet starts Monday, then they instantly go scarcity. And they're like, oh, I'm on a diet, which means I'm not allowed to have X, Y, and Z. So then they deprive, and might last a couple weeks. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't take this anymore. I'm just going to have like one piece of pizza, but they have 2 or 3 weeks of deprivation. So then they binge, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I binge. I got to get back on track. And then they go back to deprivation again versus learning balance. It's interesting because we have like a work-life balance with like our work and our personal life and all this stuff, but people don't think they need a fitness fat loss life balance where it's the exact same thing.
No, I mean, I think balance is the most important word in the English dictionary. But it's similar, like, even just like if you take a normal 7-day weeks, an office worker type thing who's trying to diet, typical kind of story. We've all heard it. Someone's working and she's like, oh, I've been good all week on a Friday night. And then suddenly, because she's been good all week, the weekend is just a blowout. And she undoes all of her good work in the week. Yeah. And then the weekend is a blowout. And like, I think a lot of people often think a binge is, like eating 2 tubs of ice cream at 11 p.m. at night. And that constitutes a binge, or avoiding food in front of others and, eating a whole pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning so nobody else knows about it and stuff like that. And that is very extreme versions of binge eating. But then so too is being good all week and letting yourself go a bit too much at the weekend. So too is not having, trying to stick to 1,000 calories a day and then giving yourself a whole week off where you stick to 3,000 calories a day. That's a form of binge eating as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many levels to it. Just like the fact that people have ill relationships around food, where like as soon as Monday rolls around, people have like a scarcity mentality. Because when they're scarce, they're like, wait, it's interesting because like when Monday rolls around and people go into scarcity mode, it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to have this for a really long time. So then the weekend gets there and they indulge, and then they go, I'm going to be back to my diet on Monday. I don't know when the next time I can have pizza again, so I better get all I can have now. Like, this is the world's last pizza. And the issue is like, that's not the case though, right? Like, you could literally have pizza every single day. You could have a donut every single day. Like, there's nothing in the world we live in around food that's scarce. You know what I mean? Whereas but people have this relationship around food that's like certain foods are scarce because they're on a diet. But like one of my favorite ways to fix this with my clients is I basically like figure out the foods that they have issues with, and I make them eat them every single day. Like if they're scared of eating like chips, I tell them to go to the vending machine and buy a little mini bag of chips every single day till the anxiety goes away. And then they lose weight eating chips, then it's like something snapped. It's like God snapped his fingers and fixes it all.
That's exactly the same conversations we was having with the scale.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You have to put what you're struggling with in front of you, make that your target to fix it, but it's not through avoidance.
No.
Right? I would argue avoidance makes the issue worse. But the thing is with like food relationships, they're no different than people relationships as they take time to grow and cultivate, but even more so if there's baggage, right? Like imagine like I have friends who their parents were pretty absent when they were little. Like one of my friends, her mom basically like at 3, like bounced and got out and was into drugs and like did really bad stuff and just got out of the picture and left her daughter. Well, now her daughter is an adult in her 20s and the mom came back into her life and is like, hey, I want to have a relationship with you. Well, because there's baggage, the daughter's not just going to go, okay, mom, back to normal. There's like the daughter's going to have boundaries and she's going to be like, okay, let's start the mend. But she's not going to go back to hunky-dory and all happy-go-lucky. She's going to say, here's the boundaries, and let's slowly start to fix this. Same thing with food. If you have a bad history of binge eating or a bad history of food relationships, you can't just go, oh, I'm going to have Doritos every day or Oreos and donuts and be fine. It's like, no, you need to put up boundaries. I'm going to have one every single day. I'm not going to have them in the house until I'm at a good place with this. So I'm going to go out to the gas station every single day and buy a donut. I'm going to go to the vending machine at work every single day and buy a mini bag of chips. Then I'm going to slowly heal this relationship I have with food until it's at the point where it's good and I can have the foods back into my house.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great strategy. What I find really interesting about the scarcity thing, going back to kind of work and when Monday rolls around and that conversation, is I find it interesting that people think they can be more scarce with their diet when they have a greater routine in their life. Right. So like, you know, our work dictates a big rhythm of our life.
Sure.
And they think because they have that rhythm in terms of where they've got to be and what they have to do each day, they can then add on a layer of restriction in that because they're already physically restricted and mentally restricted. They can add on a layer of restriction on top of that with what foods they eat. And then it's like, but if you just kept routine in your life the whole time, you might be able to find balance in that. Or if you just allowed freedom when you have strict routine and freedom when you didn't have strict routine, you'd find greater balance across the whole week as well. It's just interesting how like how your physical environment is affecting your personal and physical relationship with food as well. It's rough. It's really rough.
I mean, I think the key word with that you just said is freedom. Like we want freedom. If you think about all areas in our life we thrive in, because the goal is not to just get by, the goal is to thrive. We want freedom in everything, right? We want freedom with our work. Like it's generally if someone has a flexible work schedule that's more free, people are happier. Versus if they're like 9 to 5, it has a whole different energy. Versus if someone has a relationship that's very free. Not saying you can cheat on your partner, but I'm saying is if it's not like micromanaged and they're checking cell phones and checking internet usage and like where are you, what are you doing, it's there's a freedom about it. Like right now I just looked out my window and my wife just like left and she's just I think going to go get lunch with a friend and I don't care. I don't give a shit what she does. Or it's the same thing with this. Like we have a relationship that's very free. I don't control her, she doesn't control me. If you think about your money, right? You want to have enough abundance financially where you feel free. You don't have to, live paycheck to paycheck. You don't want to, fret over every dollar you spend. Freedom, if we can get freedom in something, we're free. We feel bulletproof. We feel like we can thrive. But the issue around food is everyone feels trapped. They feel like they're in a steel cage. That's like a little dog crate that a little puppy would fit in. We're like, that's how people feel around food and fat loss. And that's the issue. Because we have these goals around fitness and fat loss and nutrition and all this stuff because we think it'll make us happier and it'll make our lives better. But too often we get into cases where we actually feel held back and like we can't have our happiness because of fitness, fat loss, guilt, anxiety, deprivation, all these crazy negative emotions around food, where it actually ends up, if taken wrong, it can be an impediment to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a really great way of summing it up. And we thrive in freedom. I think that's a fantastic way. It's like on stage we used to, plays are called plays because you're meant to play. It's a playground.
Yes.
You're meant to have fun. You're meant to enjoy
Yep.
yourself, and you're meant to explore, develop, and investigate it when you're playing Hamlet, Othello, whoever it might be. And I take the same attitude into the gym. I'm like, yeah, okay, there's like you can find freedom within the guidelines. Like you have to build a structure and then just play around and find your freedom, like
Yeah.
do what you enjoy within your structure, within your guidelines. And once you find that freedom within that, you are gonna be happier. You're gonna do so much better. You're gonna listen to your body a lot more. You're gonna probably improve your weights because you're gonna go, you know what, I'll try this today. I'll do that. You'll get rid of fear around it as well. And it all comes so full circle. It's like the gym should be a playground, your pantry should be a playground, and you should investigate and enjoy in every way, shape, and form you possibly can. I think
absolutely. No, that's such an amazing. That's such an amazing analogy to use. Is that it should be a fun playground because we like how like a little kid goes to like a sandbox or a playground. That's such a. I'm going to use that.
I'll let you have it. I'll let you have it as a thank you for coming on to the podcast. Bro. You can have it, my friend.
Thanks,
just make sure you tag me in it, okay?
I will. I'll tag you in it.
But it's true, but it's true of anything, isn't it? It's like if I look at children these days, like as I'm getting older, like I'm 33, and I look at children, and I'm now starting to see in animals as well, and they just have this. Their innocence is dictated by their freedom. They have they have no restriction. They have no understanding of what the world is. They're just free. And that brings them that innocence, and that innocence makes them happy. And I think as an adult, we probably spend far too much of our life not understanding that is really what we need to try and achieve. We need to find innocence in order to find that freedom. Like what you said with your wife, she's just gone. She's gone innocently. Now, if you start attaching all kinds of guilt to it, if you have personal guilt, or if you think there's guilt in her life and between your relationship, then her leaving suddenly isn't an innocent act of freedom.
Right.
It's suddenly a loaded act of triggering.
It's interesting because if you look at like comparing it to children, like you just said, they find there's freedom, but children operate best when they find freedom within boundaries and guidelines. But there's a difference between structures and structure, boundary, guidelines, and a rigid protocol. If you told a child how he can play, you can only take these two race cars or action figures and only play with them this way, that would be bad. But if you just said, hey, don't leave the backyard, do whatever you want to do, don't leave the backyard, don't leave the playground. It's the same thing as with like guys like you and I, when we coach, is we want as much freedom as possible with our clients within boundaries and guidelines. Where it gets sticky is when you say, okay, you have to eat 6 times a day, this many calories per meal, you can only eat these 3 foods. And all of a sudden it's like telling a child how he can play versus like when our nephews come over, because we don't have kids, we have nephews. And when their nephews come over, I do not care what they do in my backyard. I just don't want them leaving my backyard. That's why we have a fence. I said, you can go climb trees, you can go jump over stuff, you can go run, you can go dig holes. I don't care what you do, just don't leave the backyard. And they go and have a blast. It's the same thing. It's like, look, save your calories, eat mostly whole foods, strength train. But if you want some donuts every day, have some donuts. If you want to go enjoy yourself. But you should be as free as possible within this stuff. It's like with like Shelby and my relationship, my wife. Like our boundaries are, we're married. We don't have sex with anyone else other than each other. We stay committed to our relationship, like normal marital stuff. But like she's going, I think, to get lunch with a friend. And I'm sitting here with you. Like we don't report to each other. It's that same kind of thing. That there's a structure and boundaries of marriage. But otherwise, it's like we do whatever we want. Like, you know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much of that is entwined into trust, right? If your nephews jump the fence, suddenly you'd consider building a bigger boundary because they've broken your trust. Like my fiance at the minute is in Australia. She's in Queensland, and I haven't seen her for the last like 3-4 months. And I don't know when I'm going to see her again. But not once have I second guessed my relationship. Not once have I thought, oh, she's going out tonight. Or not once have I thought, what is she doing right now? Why is she not like, the thought hasn't entered my head. Because our entire relationship is based on complete and utter trust. And I think when people get given their boundaries, who we coach, they get given their boundaries, they find that freedom. When they step outside that boundary and they feel like they've broken their trust to themselves, not necessarily to us as our coach, because us as their coach will always empathize with them. We'll always sit there and we'll go, yeah, that makes sense. Like, just tell me, talk to me, and then we'll rebuild that trust within it. It's when they feel like they've broken the trust with themselves, does it become a bigger problem. And they need to understand that they can trust themselves. They can trust themselves to go outside of the boundaries, because they can trust themselves to come back inside, as long as they're honest about it, they move forward with it, and they resolve it within themselves.
Absolutely, man. Like, that was so beautifully stated. It all comes back to that relationship we have with ourselves, right? It's why it all goes back to reinforcing the inner work, right? If you have a horrible relationship with the person in the mirror, that's the stem of your problem, right? It's not calories. It's not protein. It's saying it like that makes it sound just like juvenile, right? But it's one of those things where it's like, no, how you feel about yourself, how you show up for yourself. Are you the person who you think you are, that you say you are, that you try to be? Are you that person, right? It's why one of my, another core value of mine when it comes to coaching is when I'm teaching people is take pride in promise keeping, especially when you don't want to, because it's just like our ability to keep our own promises to ourselves dictates, to be honest, our happiness. Because it's what most people struggle with. It's like, if you say, I'm gonna start over tomorrow, and you don't. I'm gonna get up tomorrow morning and do cardio, and don't. Or I'm gonna not fall off the deep end this weekend and fail. Like, you keep chipping away at that every day, and that's what's gonna cause you to unravel, and that's what's gonna cause you to quit believing in yourself. It's no wonder you're not confident. The past 100 promises you didn't fulfill. It's no different than like if I told you right this interview, if you said, Jared, let's do it tomorrow at 2:15, and I said okay, and I just didn't show up, and you said, hey, what's going on? And I said, I just changed my mind. You would be like, oh, well, that's not cool. And then I would be like, well, let's reschedule for tomorrow. And then if you're like, you're a good dude, so you'd be like, okay, let's do it tomorrow. And then I just no-show you again. And then you're like, hey, just checking in. I thought we were doing this. And I go, oh, well, my favorite TV show is on, so I just decided not to show up. And I said, but let's do it tomorrow. You would probably be like, all right, I'll give him one more shot. And then you're like, all right, let's do it tomorrow. And then I no-show again. Guess what? Your belief level in me is dropping every time, is it not? You're losing respect for me. You're losing confidence in me if I were to do that. But and most people would agree to that, rightfully so. But most people do that to themselves. I'm going to start over tomorrow. No show. I'm going to get my workout in tomorrow after work. No show. I'm going to start my nutrition over. Don't do it. And then we lose the same respect for ourselves as you would someone else that didn't respect you. You know what I mean?
It's similar to the James Clear principle in Atomic Habits, isn't it? Of never miss twice. You know, if you're going to make a promise to yourself, never miss twice. Yeah, miss one day, that's fine. Don't miss two. Because if you miss two, you're going to miss 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yep.
And then it's so much harder to get back on. You put that on a pedestal, and you're just never going to be able to manage it again. And what you say about giving up on yourself and everything else, I think that comes very much from how people have been treated in their lives as well by others time and time again. Like when I first started as a personal trainer, and you hear it still bandied about quite a lot, like, oh, you know, if your clients aren't adhering to what you ask them to do and everything, then just fire them, get rid of them. If they're causing you too much stress, just get rid of them, fire them. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that, because the people I work with have probably had people fire them mentally, physically, emotionally, all of their lives. And the reason they're coming to me is so that they're not going to get fired. The reason they're coming to me is that I will always believe in them, even when they treat me poorly. And I will never give up on you. You might end up giving up on yourself at some point, and hopefully that won't happen that soon. But I'm not going to be the one that pulls the plug, because I am. It's my responsibility as your coach to keep believing in you, no matter what.
Absolutely. No, I love that, because that's the thing is, it's also like an analogy I like to use with this is some people just take longer. Like, for a coach to fire someone because they're struggling is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's like a tutor firing, like refusing to work with someone because they don't understand math. But it's like, that's what a tutor is for.
Yeah.
It's like, so growing up, I wasn't like, when it came to school, like normal school stuff, I was like, that was not my cup of tea. Had lots of, like, I almost wonder if I had like a learning disability. Like I struggled that much. But there would be time, like I would be doing math, struggled with math. Now I do calorie calculating, right, for a living. But like I would be struggling with math really bad. And I would just be working with a problem. And I'm just like, I would literally do it 50 times. And I did not understand it. I was getting more confused, more frustrated, more upset. The longer I was with it, I kept struggling. But then like the one time it was like, oh, it makes sense now. And I think about that every time I have a client who's really going through a rough time, where a coach normally would have fired them as a client, where it's like, what if this is just their math problem, where it's like they're just struggling, but then they hit the one, it's like a piñata. You're hitting, swinging, feeling like nothing's happening, but then one day you go boom, and the candy goes everywhere. And that's how it is. And I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that's been their reality, because people forget. I think coaches forget that we're like, in so many cases, it's like the math tutor, right? People come to us because they're struggling, not because they're thriving. They've been struggling and having a hard time, so they're getting us to help. And that's when we need to be more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding, have more grace, and not just be like, no, you inconsistent fuck, like quit doing that. You know, it's that same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like having 2,000 wires and we've just got to find the one that's going to turn the light bulb on. But you know, and sometimes we'll find it quicker with others, and sometimes it will take us to 1,999. But once we get that light bulb on, we're working. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good note to probably like put a pin in this, because I think otherwise we'll be here all night, won't we? It's great. It's wonderful. Jared, thank you so much for coming on. Like, it means so much to me, and I'm sure like all my listeners are going to really value this. It's been such a great episode, and it's so great to hear that people I get on my podcast bring flowers to their wife. That's really wonderful. And it's also, you know, I've got to say, I think you probably have the best beard in fitness. It's looking very good.
I've been working on it. He needs trimmed a little bit, but like I've been nursing this beard for 28 years, my friend.
It's looking good. It's far better than mine. I can't grow one. So there you go, buddy. Tell the world how they can find you, because I'm sure they're going to want to.
I appreciate that. So first of all, best place to find me is two places. Either it's actually being rebuilt right now, but my website is hamiltontrained.com. But otherwise, the easiest place to find me is my podcast, which is the Hamilton Trained podcast, or over on Instagram at Real Jared Hamilton. But yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor. I always love connecting with you, so I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, dude. My pleasure. I didn't realize you had your own podcast. That's just ignorance on my behalf. I'll definitely
190 episodes in, my friend.
Excellent. I'll put that in my ears for sure. Because I've enjoyed this. I don't do these podcasts for my listeners. I do them for me. I'm sure I'm the person who gets the most out of them. I'm telling you.
I appreciate that, man.
I'm sure it's not true, but it's been an absolute joy. Jared, like, you have the most amazing day. I hope your wife comes back happy and healthy, and and honestly, from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of everyone who listens to this, from the bottom of everybody who listens to this heart, is that a phrase? Is that a sentence?
There we go. I like it.
Thank you so much. It really truly appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother, man. I appreciate it. The pleasure's always mine. So
you're too kind. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.